I came across her in my grandmother's album of old family photographs. Who was this girl in a European dress amongst my Indian ancestors? In all these years of hearing countless stories about my family, nobody had spoken to me about her. A few years after I moved to Edinburgh, I found out that my great-grandfather had also come to this city 100 years earlier from India to study medicine. I asked my grandmother's older sister to show me photographs of my great-grandfather and to read about him from an autobiography she has written.
یہ تصویر میرے دادا کی ہے اور ان کے برابر میں یہ جو مشرف الحق ہیں ان کے بیٹے بڑے بیٹے اور یہ اشرف الحق ہیں میرے والد. ابا کو لندن جا کر پڑھنے اور ڈاکٹر بننے کا شوق تھا مگر والد صاحب رضامند نہیں تھے. اس کے باوجود 17 سال کی عمر میں از خود لندن جانے کے لیے بمبئی پہنچ گئے. یہ میری بڑی پھوپھی ہیں اصغری بیگم اور یہ میری چھوٹی پھوپھی ہیں خیسری بیگم. یہ ان کی جوانی کی ہے. یہ بعد کی تصویر ہے.
Khaisri Begum, my great-grandfather's younger sister, spent many of her later years recording her memories. Her granddaughter reads from this collection.
ہم لوگ دلی میں تھے کہ ابا کا تار آیا اور اس میں یہ اطلاع تھی کہ اشرف الحق ولایت چلے گئے. اس تار سے جو غم و اندوہ ٹوٹا ہے تو خدا کی پناہ. سارا کنبہ اکٹھا ہو گیا اور اماں کی حالت ایسی کہ دیکھی نہ جاتی تھی. گھبراہٹ کے دورے پڑنے لگے. یوں بھی ان کی صحت کچھ اچھی نہ تھی اور ولایت تو کون جاتا تھا. سمندر پار دوسری دنیا جان جوکھوں کا معاملہ. ابا جان کا مفصل خط آیا تو اس سے معلوم ہوا کہ بھائی محمد اشرف الحق چھٹیوں میں ابا کے پاس حیدرآباد آئے ہوئے تھے. طبیعت میں ان کی شوخی، شرارت، تیزی، ظرافت، جدت پسندی تو ہمیشہ سے تھی اور ہم سب حیدرآباد میں تھے نہیں کہ دل لگتا. ابا کا ادب قاعدہ اس قدر کے بات کرتے بھی حجاب مانے ہوتا تھا. ابا جان کو جو اڑتی اڑتی خبر ملی کہ صاحبزادے ولایت سے دھارے تو خود ابا بھی فوراً ان کے پیچھے بمبئی روانہ ہو گئے کہ واپس لے آؤں. لیکن وہی ہوتا ہے جو قدرت کو منظور ہوتا ہے. جس دن ابا بمبئی پہنچے اسی دن جہاز روانہ ہونے والا تھا اور بھائی صاحب سوار ہو چکے تھے. ابا جہاز پر پہنچے. بھائی نے ان کو دیکھا لیکن جہاز روانہ ہو گیا.
He went away as a stowaway, ship pe.
اچھا.
ہاں.
I asked my mother and my grandmother to tell me more about my great-grandfather.
اسٹوویر بن کے پہنچ گئے لندن. وہاں سے اپنے نانا کو لکھا کہ میں تو پہنچ گیا، میں یہاں پڑھنا چاہ رہا ہوں، ڈاکٹری کرنا چاہ رہا ہوں، مجھے پیسے چاہیے. یہ ابا ہیں دلہا بنے ہوئے.
When did he meet your mother? As soon as he came back to India? Yeah.
میچ کا سوال نہیں ہے.
ولایت سے آنے کے بعد نسبتوں کی تلاش رہنے لگی. کئی لڑکیاں جا جا کر دیکھیں لیکن کوئی پسند نہ آئی. ایک دن ایک صاحب اسم نویسی لائے اور جہیز کی پوری فہرست اس کے ساتھ منسلک تھی اور بولے کہ چل کر لڑکی کو دیکھو.
سی اماں بس پریٹی. شادی کے بعد کی ہے. وہ زمانے میں خوب کھینچ کے بال، کیونکہ اماں کے گھنگریالے بال تھے تو یوں چپکا کے بغیر سر پہ اڑے ہوئے. بہت ماڈرن تھے ہمارے. 3 سال تک اماں کو بچے نہیں ہوئے. That's the house where I was born. This is the entrance. It's finished now.
But what about the 10 years that he spent in Edinburgh? I found very little about his life here. His university record, which shows that he joined the university in October 1897, and that he once lived at 23 Melville Terrace. This is a tree-lined street that overlooks the meadows not far from the university. For many years I lived in a tenement just around the corner from here. He too would have crossed the meadows on clear sunny mornings, when white frost still covered the grass, or on damp foggy afternoons, when the clouds hung low over the streets and light from the lamps could not break the gloom. Even then, on such days, he would have been able to smell the sea. There is a photograph taken in 1898 with two friends in a studio on Nicholson Square. His brother also followed him to Edinburgh. Here are the two brothers on either side. This was in 1899. He edited a collection of Persian and Arabic manuscripts held at the Edinburgh University Library. In the 1901 census, Muhammad Ashraf was boarding at 9 Melville Terrace. The city would have smelt different in those days, of coal and wood and poorly covered drains. There were tramcars, and electric lights were starting to enter people's homes, alongside candles and firelight from the hearth. One day I stopped at the registrar to see if they held any records for my great-grandfather, and there, unexpectedly, I found myself peering into a world that had been concealed and forgotten when I found their marriage record. On the 21st of October 1905, Muhammad Ashraful Haq, medical student, age 26, married Jeannie Grieve Brown, age 20. Their wedding was witnessed by her father, a watchmaker called Alfred Stowe Brown, and someone called Mia Kedarnath Singh Guleria. Ashraf was living at 14 Melville Terrace, and Jeannie was living with her father at 13 Caledonian Crescent. 4 months later, a little girl was born in Edinburgh in February 1906. They named her Amina Mubashar Hasina Haq. The 1911 census records that Amina, now 5 years old, was living with her grandfather, Alfred Stowe Brown, the watchmaker, and her 21-year-old uncle, also called Alfred, at 34 Caledonian Crescent. Alfred Stowe Brown was a self-employed watchmaker and jeweller, and he worked from home. I don't know exactly when my great-grandfather went back to India, but on the 25th of September 1910, he married my great-grandmother, Khairunissa Begum.
अब्बा क्यों वापस चले गए? I have no idea. Maybe because the parents wanted him to be back and he had run away in a way.
Qaisri Begum recounts in her memoirs.
कुछ रकम फौरन बड़े भाई साहब के पास रवाना कर दी कि वहाँ की मेम को देकर उससे गुलू खलासी करा लें कि उनको सख्त नापसंद थी। विलायत की आज़ादी और आवारगी उनको एक आन पसंद न थी।
Where was my great-grandfather's first wife, the now 26-year-old Jeannie Grieve Brown? I could find no trace of her in the 1911 census, in Scotland or in England. There is a record of a J.G. Brown, a single or unaccompanied woman, who boarded a ship to Calcutta in 1909, but I cannot verify if this was Jeannie. After 3 years of marriage, in October 1913, my great-grandmother gave birth to my father's mother in Hyderabad, in India. And then, before war broke out and changed everyone's lives in Europe, in January 1914, a little girl was run over by a motor car while trying to cross Dalry Road.
Did he ever talk about her?
नहीं, मैं बहुत छोटी थी, मेरे से कम बात करते, मगर दिस आई फाउंड इन अम्मा's एल्बम। तो अम्मा ने बताया था कि कौन है ये, नहीं तुम्हारी बहन है, पहली तुम्हारे अब्बा की जो बीवी थी उनकी बेटी है ये, वो उसका इंतकाल हो गया। दैट्स हाउ आई नो दैट मच। अब वो ज़माने कौन पूछता कि किटी थी, क्यों हो गया ये सब, नो क्वेश्चंस। ये भी अम्मा के उसमें थे।
Hello, Betty. My name is Sana Bilgrami. I'm actually ringing from Edinburgh in Scotland. I've spent a long time trying to track somebody down, anybody who might be a sort of relative of Jane. Was Alfred Stowe Brown's daughter. Alfred was your grandfather's brother. Did you know that she had a little daughter with my great grandfather? Do you know what happened to her? But you think that Margaret would know better. Hello, is that Margaret? I've been trying to find you for a long time, so I'm very happy to have reached you. Jane Grieve Brown, who was the daughter of Alfred Stowe Brown. I think he was the older brother of your grandfather. You don't know anything about what happened to her.
Eventually, I found her death record. Jeanie Grieve Brown lived until the age of 93. She died in Essex on the 18th of July in 1978. She was a retired hospital matron. I found out that Jeanie trained as a nurse at the Lewisham Infirmary in London from December 1911 to 1914. So she was working in a hospital in London when her daughter died in Edinburgh. In 1915, she moved back to Edinburgh and worked at the Royal Maternity Hospital. She also worked as a woman inspector for the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. During the war, she joined the Territorial Army Nursing Service and worked as a military nurse at the 3rd Western General Hospital in Neath. 3 years later, she returned to London, and then she must have seen this advertisement in the hospital newspaper. In July 1919, she wrote to the Secretary of State for India and applied to join the Queen Alexandra Indian Military Nursing Service as a temporary nurse. Less than a month later, she set sail to India on the 14th of August 1919. She must have been in India for at least a year. At the end of 1920, she joined the Ham Green Sanatorium near Bristol. And then she was appointed a matron at the Taunton Isolation Hospital. Here it says that while she was in India, J. Grieve Brown worked at the British Station Hospital in Secunderabad. Secunderabad was a British cantonment next to the city of Hyderabad, where my great-grandfather lived and worked as a military doctor. I find it impossible to believe that they didn't meet again. My great-grandfather wrote many medical books. He also published a collection of sexually graphic poetry that was banned. Here he writes about the slender neck of a woman who cut her hair. There are no names. These sketches made me return to that photograph taken in 1918 in Neath, a year before Jeanie set sail for India. From all these faces, I keep returning to this one. It seems familiar, the broad jawline, the wide eyes, thin sculpted lips, and her open face. I want to believe this is the elusive Jeanie, just the way I want to believe that the sketches are hers. Jeanie was at the Taunton Isolation Hospital for 2 years. Her last entry in the staff book was made on 30th April 1925, and the next day, on the 1st of May, she sailed to India again as a squadron nurse. She stayed in India for 3 years, but I have no records of where she lived or worked. In 1928, at the age of 48, she returned to London, where she worked for the next 20 years. A year after Jeanie returned to London from India, my grandmother, a 15-year-old girl, urged by her father, travelled to London to study medicine. 2 years later, to his disappointment and anger, she gave up her studies to marry my grandfather, who was also studying in England. She became pregnant and they returned to live in India. This is a photograph of her with my great-grandfather a few years before he died. It is difficult to see through the grain, but I can recognise myself in both those faces. My great-grandfather died in 1943. After the Second World War, Jeanie moved to Essex, where she must have retired and where she died. 2 generations on, I am treading on a strangely familiar path. My son will carry with him the traces of all our histories,